Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. My fingers tightened on the worn straps of my camera bag, a flimsy defense against the ceaseless gale dominating this exposed ridge. Here, at the threshold of the skeletal village, the wind never paused its lament. It shrieked through the gaps in fractured walls and howled down passages stripped bare of doors. Beneath my boots, stones grated, and eddies of fine dust pirouetted around my ankles. I'd come seeking images, fragments of this hill-bound ruin, lured by its desolate reputation and the relentless breath that, folk whispered, drove all souls away. A crumbling stone riser yielded passage onto a slender track. Desolation was absolute. The nearest dwelling was a husk, reduced to a defiant corner against the sky, its timbered skeleton scattered like bones. The wind worried these remnants, dragging them with a grating scrape that echoed like furniture tormented across a rough-hewn floor. I pressed onward, the shutters click a small metallic counterpoint to the gale. On the tiny screen, the captured world was rubble and racing cloud shadows under an immense, indifferent sky. An unfamiliar tempo thrummed beneath my ribs. Solitude pressed in, yet it was laced with something else, a tautness, part exhilaration, part a nascent dread. The place was meant to be unnerving, yes, but I hadn't anticipated the wind itself possessing such a palpable, almost sentient quality. I halted before the choked maw of a collapsed well. Abruptly the wind veered, striking my back like a physical blow. My jacket billowed, its frantic flapping almost drowning the sound of my own breath. And then, distinct within the roar, my name. Elara. A single utterance seemingly breathed just behind my shoulder. Whipping around, camera nearly slipping from my grasp, I found only vacancy. Dust devils danced in a ravaged doorway. My mouth went parchment dry. A trick of the air, I reasoned, a phantom echo shaped by the wind's passage. Yet my legs felt strangely unreliable, my palms slick. Gripping the camera tighter, I retreated a slow step, aimed the lens at the vacant doorway, and captured the image. Splintered wood, a jagged silhouette of stone, nothing more. Deeper I walked, taking a breath that felt thin and gritty. The path coiled past houses whose roofs had surrendered, spilling their innards onto the earth. Rags clung stubbornly to the debris. Twisted metal hinted at hearths, long cold. More photographs. Brief lulls in the wind allowed the crunch of my own footfalls to surface, stark against the thumping in my ears. My gaze flickered constantly over my shoulder, anticipating a figure stepping from behind a listing wall. Calm yourself, I chided. It's abandoned. The hour-long drive up had shown no sign of life, not a soul on the winding road, let alone within these ruins. I emerged into what might have been a central square, dominated by a low platform of weathered stone blocks, perhaps a place for pronouncements in a forgotten time. The wind circled, finding a loose sheet of corrugated metal on a nearby roof, rattling it with infuriating persistence. Clang, clang, clang. I gritted my teeth against the sound, raising my camera to document the desolate plaza. A flicker of movement snagged my peripheral vision. Right, Near the corner of another ruin, a shadow dark and distinct seemed to retract the instant my head turned. My breath hitched, muscles coiled. I took a hesitant step towards it, poised for revelation, but only silence answered. Rounding the corner revealed nothing but tumbled stones and a battered door propped against the wall. No prints disturbed the dust, no trace of passage. The wind surged anew, sweeping grit across the ground. I stood frozen, listening to the ragged rhythm of my own breathing, a knot tightening in my stomach. Goose flesh prickled my arms beneath the jacket. Exhaling slowly, I moved on. Decision made, I ventured into one of the more substantial structures. Its roof gaped open to the sky, but two walls still stood defiant. The doorway yawned, empty. Inside, chaos reigned. Shattered furniture littered the floor, a table overturned, chairs splintered into kindling. Crockery lay scattered, some chipped, others reduced to glittering shards. I fought the urge to imagine the lives lived and lost here, forcing my focus onto the tangible evidence of decay. Crouching, I photographed the detritus, the camera's flash momentarily banishing shadows, illuminating swirling motes of disturbed dust with each shot. And then I froze. A gust slammed against the house, and woven through its roar, unmistakable this time, Alara. Clearer now, not a muffled trick of acoustics, but a whisper, faint yet chillingly intimate, as if breathed directly against my ear. My entire being locked rigid. Blood rushed to my face, hot against the wind's chill. Motionless, holding my breath, I listened. My eyes darted frantic, scanning the gloom for any flicker, any shape. Silence returned. Instinct screamed, "Behind you." I spun, flashlight beam stabbing towards the collapsed section of the roof. Nothing, only the groan of stressed timbers as the wind pressed inward. A tremor started in my hands. My arms were rigid, my legs felt like water. A powerful urge to flee warred with an equally potent compulsion to understand, to find the source of that impossible voice. Slowly, I rose, sweeping the flashlight beam across the stained walls, past the broken table. Glass fragments crunched underfoot, the sound jarringly loud. Calling out seemed futile, my throat constricted. Suddenly, a sharp thud erupted from the corner to my left. I flinched violently, nearly fumbling the light. A chunk of plaster or ceiling debris had fallen onto a listing cupboard, raising a choking cloud of dust. My eyes watered, I coughed, backing away. I stumbled back through the empty doorway, emerging into the wind's harsh embrace. Grit coated my tongue. Out in the relative open, I leaned against a cracked wall, forcing slow, deliberate breaths. My pulse hammered, a frantic drum against my eardrums. Onward, perhaps the next row of houses held some photographic marvel to distract from this pervasive unease. Between two leaning structures, the passage narrowed. New shadows pooled at the far end. My flashlight beam sliced through the gloom, revealing only more rubble, weathered bricks. I pressed my back against the cold stone of the left wall, feeling its rough texture through my jacket. Heart pounding, that sensation returned. The prickling certainty of being observed by unseen eyes. The wind intensified, its voice rising to a keening howl. Loose debris skittered across the path. Faint, complex sounds now threaded through the gale. Whispers that almost formed words. Fragments of speech just beyond comprehension. something akin to distant chanting or a mournful, soft singing. My arms felt leaden, my stomach churned. Wind echoes, I muttered, the words tasting like ash. Just the wind. I found another collapsed shell, then a larger house retaining a precarious section of roof. Its door hung askew from a single tortured hinge. Stepping inside released a miasma of damp earth and decay. The flashlight painted a hallway with faded, peeling walls and a fractured floor. To the left, a large room beckoned, a living space perhaps, centered on a stone fireplace whose chimney was mostly reclaimed by the sky. I aimed the camera, fired the flash. Fleeting shapes danced at the edges of the light, illusions I forced myself to ignore. Record what is here. Only that. I advanced towards the far wall. The beam found fallen shelves, books scattered below, their pages swollen and fused by damp. Leaning closer, I captured the image, and then a whisper of laughter, delicate and chilling, drifted from directly above. My scalp prickled. Head snapping up, I saw the ragged hole in the ceiling, the skeletal remains of an upper room. Flashlight aimed high, expecting maybe an owl, a trapped bird, revealed only rotting timbers and the twisted frame of a bed. The laughter dissolved into the wind's moan. I swallowed against a tightening throat, the pulse in my temples deafening. Back in the hallway, the light probed another room, a kitchen. Rusted pots and pans lay strewn across the floor. A few still clung to the walls, swaying gently in the drafts. The wind's howl shifted, modulating into what sounded uncannily like a soft, layered prayer. Multiple voices, indistinct, yet undeniably present. My stomach clenched. I whispered my own name, Alara, seeking reassurance, but my voice trembled. Edging forward, a dark shape flickered at the periphery of my vision. A swift turn, light sweeping the walls. Nothing. My breathing grew shallow, rapid. Tension radiated from my shoulders. I pushed open a door at the back, a smaller room, wooden floor coated in dust, an overturned cabinet, a heap of decaying linens. Shattered windows provided free passage for the wind, which tugged at my clothes and stirred the dust into patterns. Footprints, faint but visible in the layer of grime. Old, perhaps ancient. My hands shook as I photographed them, struggling to hold the camera steady. Fresh air. I needed it again. I found a side door and pushed through. Outside, the light was failing, the clouds above thickening into a bruised purple canopy. The wind showed no sign of abating. Stay or go. Part of me screamed retreat. Back to the car, back to the known world. Yet an invisible pressure held me, a sense that the village itself demanded further witness. The echoes persisted. Phantom conversations, spectral laughter, fragments of chant snagged on the turbulent air, trapped within these decaying walls. Another alleyway beckoned, narrow and claustrophobic, hemmed in by leaning walls. Broken tiles crunched underfoot, each step a high-pitched scrape against the silence between gusts. More pictures. The camera beeped softly, memory dwindling. Select later, I promised myself. Around a bend, a small courtyard opened up, centered by a derelict fountain. Its stone was chipped, the basin bone dry and webbed with cracks. Remnants of benches lined the perimeter, one utterly destroyed, another merely missing its seat. Camera raised, documenting the decay. A metallic rattle sounded behind me. I spun, scanning. A loose piece of guttering swung rhythmically from a roof edge, striking the wall with a hollow clang, but the tension coiled within me refused to ease. My pulse remained erratic. Then, abruptly, the wind died. Silence fell, thick and unnatural. I could hear only my own harsh, ragged breathing, and in that quiet, stark and unmistakable, raising the hairs on my neck, the voices. Not whispers now, but a clear, flowing cadence of unfamiliar words, ancient prayers, incantations. A wave of cold dread washed through me. My eyes darted wildly, seeking a source, a speaker. Empty stone, empty air, hand pressed to my chest, feeling the frantic bird of my heart. Leave. Now. I took stumbling steps towards the courtyard entrance, but halted again. Curiosity, stubbornness, or something else compelling me to see this through. Wiping sweat from my brow, chilled by the wind, yet flushed with adrenaline and fear, I approached the fountain, navigating the rubble. The wind returned with sudden violence, whipping dust into my stinging eyes. Blink rapidly, snap the picture. The flash flared, momentarily illuminating the scene, and in that fraction of a second, beside one of the broken benches, a figure, solid, standing. A gasp tore from my throat as I thrust the flashlight beam towards the spot. The bench stood alone, starkly empty. My heart hammered against my ribs, a painful, suffocating rhythm. Panting, I stared at the empty space, the wind buffeting me, tugging at my jacket like impatient hands. Imagination, a trick of light and shadow and fear. Enough. The pressure in my chest felt unbearable. I turned, leaving the courtyard, heading back towards the path that led out, away. My pace quickened, short of a run but propelled by urgency. Footsteps echoed on the cracked paving stones. In the brief lulls of the wind, distant murmurs seemed to follow, eyes fixed forward. Only once did I pause, checking the camera's nearly full memory card. Finally, the edge. The crumbling stone step where this unsettling pilgrimage began. I stopped, turned, surveyed the broken skyline of the village. The wind still sang its mournful, complex song through the ruins, carrying sounds that could be whispers, could be memories given voice. My hands felt clammy on the camera body, shoulders screaming with accumulated tension, mouth dry, tasting dust with every swallow. One last photograph, the entire desolate panorama, and then the voice, one final time. Alara. Soft, carried on the breeze, yet perfectly clear. Every nerve ending fired. I felt an urge to answer, to call out into the emptiness, but my throat closed, voiceless. My eyes burned, raw from dust and strain. I turned my back on the ruins and descended the rocky path. The wind pursued me, plucking at my clothes. As I reached the hill's base, its ferocity lessened, though it didn't cease. One last glance over my shoulder. The village crouched against the darkening sky, silent, brooding. A residual chill lingered deep in my chest. I drew a breath, the stale air still clinging to my lips. Camera clutched tight against my side. The shadows that dissolved upon approach, the voices woven into the gale, the laughter that echoed where no one laughed, the unseen presence that had set my heart racing. These impressions crowded my mind. No answers, only images, and my name echoing in the chambers of my memory. Reaching the car felt like surfacing from a deep, cold water. Relief washed over me, potent but incomplete. The sky bled into a deeper gray. As the engine caught, The wind outside gave a final, drawn-out howl. Even sealed within the vehicle, the feeling of leaving something unresolved, something still watching, persisted. I drove away, the village shrinking in the rearview mirror with each turn. The wind whistled past the windows, a constant reminder, my mind replaying those moments of impossible sound, of glimpsed phantoms. I would tell this story, I knew, though tangible proof remained elusive, only the experience, raw and unsettling. Miles later, nearing the highway, I noticed the tremor in my hands, the white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. My heart still beat too fast. Whatever resided in that place, woven into its very fabric and carried on its breath, had reached out. That village on the hill is not empty. Its desolation is deceptive. The wind guards its past, carries the echoes of lives spectral and persistent, and for a few hours I felt them acknowledge my presence. I hadn't lingered for answers. One day had yielded more than enough, but the feeling remains. A cold spot in my memory, reignited each time I look at the photographs captured in the heart of the wind-haunted ruin. The woods possessed awareness. This truth, once a nebulous concept held at arm's length, solidified into chilling certainty as I stood enveloped by timbered titans and a silence so profound it felt fabricated. A gaze, unseen yet palpable, pressed upon me from the ancient gloom, not the familiar scrutiny of deer or owl, but something other, something deeply discordant. My name is Elias Thorne. For the better part of my 35 years, the wilderness has been my sanctuary, my proving ground. I've traced the spines of ranges from the Appalachians' green embrace to the Pacific crest's sun-scorched grandeur. Yet no map traversed, no summit gained, could have charted the territory I stumbled into within the Cascades' deep heart that autumn. It commenced as any solo expedition might. 3 days plotted through remote tracks, a chance to rigorously test the feather-light assemblage of gear I'd meticulously curated. The air held that perfect autumnal crispness, crystalline and sharp, hinting at the dormant winter poised just beyond the horizon. Day one unfolded with satisfying rhythm. My pace was strong, the miles devoured eagerly. As twilight bled ochre and violet across the sky, a small, sheltered clearing offered repose. Within my nylon shell, cocooned by the forest's nocturnal symphony, a profound tranquility settled over me. Day two, however, brought the dissonance. Camp struck before dawn. I pushed onward while mist still wreathed the boughs like spectral shrouds. The path inclined sharply, snaking upward through ever-thickening woods. These trees were patriarchs, truly ancient, their colossal girths swaddled in emerald moss, limbs contorted into shapes unnervingly anthropomorphic. Around noon, the first anomaly appeared. Initially dismissed as peculiar grain upon a weathered trunk, closer inspection revealed deliberate artifice. Intricate sigils carved with unsettling precision marred the bark. The incisions were startlingly fresh, weeping translucent sap. A frown creased my brow as I captured the image with my phone. Defacement of the wild always rankled, yet this transcended mere vandalism. These were no crude initials, no familiar spray-painted tags. They resembled fragments of some arcane script, complex and utterly alien. Ascending further, more glyphs materialized, punctuating the trail at erratic intervals, invariably etched into the most venerable trees. A disquiet, cold and insistent, coiled within me. Who had wrought these marks, and to what end? Late afternoon found me adrift. Obsessed by the cryptic symbols, I'd neglected the subtle language of the trail itself. Now, attempting to regain my bearings, I realized trail markers had vanished from my recent memory. Map and compass emerged, tools of certainty in a world suddenly fluid, but the needle performed a languid, drunken pirouette, refusing magnetic north's call. Frantic tapping yielded nothing. My compass, that steadfast arbiter of direction, had failed. A tendril of genuine fear tightened in my gut. Reaching for my phone's GPS was futile. No signal, predictably. Light began its slow retreat, shadows stretching like grasping fingers. Shelter for the night became imperative. Morning light, I reasoned, would illuminate the path back. Choosing a direction that felt vaguely promising, I pressed onward. It was then that the silence fully registered, an absolute void unlike any I'd known. No birdsong, no scuttling life in the undergrowth. Even the breeze seemed to hold its breath, rendering the forest preternaturally still. The trees loomed, their branches seeming to reach, skeletal and grasping. Peripheral flickers kept resolving into those disturbing symbols. Just as resolve wavered, threatening to collapse into weary resignation, I blundered into a small circular clearing. Dominating its center stood a behemoth, the most colossal tree yet encountered. Its bark was a tapestry of the sigils, denser, more intricate than any previous display. Yet it wasn't the carvings that arrested my breath, that froze me mid-stride. It was the door. Embedded seamlessly within the living wood was a portal, fashioned from dark timber, its surface elaborately carved with the very symbols that had haunted my ascent. It radiated antiquity, weathered and stained by epochs, yet undeniably, impossibly, a door. Hesitantly, I approached, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. This defied reality. Doors did not simply manifest in ancient trees miles from any known habitation. A hand extended, half convinced it would meet only rough bark, perhaps pass through an illusion. Solid wood met my fingertips. Real. What impulse seized me then, I cannot say. Curiosity, or some unseen volition acting upon my own. Before rational thought could intervene, my hand closed around the handle, turning. With a low groan that reverberated through the unnervingly quiet woods, the door swung inward. Beyond lay only darkness, an abyssal negation of light, so profound it seemed to actively consume the ambient twilight. I stood paralyzed, gazing into the void. Every primal instinct shrieked, retreat, flee this aberration. Yet an invisible tether held me fast, accompanied by a whisper, so faint it might have been imagined, a susurrus shaping my name. Ilias. Stepping back, the spell shattered. I slammed the impossible door shut, air tearing into my lungs in ragged bursts, and then I heard it. A low, rhythmic chanting originating from the forest's depths. It began subtly, barely more than a vibration in the air, but swelled inexorably. I spun, searching for a source, but the sound was omnipresent, enveloping me. The cadence intensified, urgent, forming words in a tongue utterly unknown, repeating in hypnotic loops. Beneath it all, Woven into the alien litany, my name persisted, a whispered promise or perhaps a dire summons. Panic erupted, obliterating reason. I ran, crashing through tangled undergrowth, heedless of the path, heedless of the damage, propelled solely by the imperative to escape. Away from the clearing, the door, the insidious chant that clung to me like burrs. Branches lashed my face. Roots seemed to writhe, seeking to trip my desperate flight. Fear, raw and primal, fueled limbs already taxed. How long I fled, I have no measure. Time dissolved in the umbral labyrinth of those woods. Eventually, legs buckling, I collapsed onto the forest floor, breath sobbing in my throat. As I lay there, spent, a realization dawned. The chanting had ceased. The profound silence had fractured, replaced by the familiar nocturnal sounds. Wind sighing through pines, the distant hoot of an owl. Pushing myself upright, I scanned my surroundings. These trees seemed ordinary. No gnarled malformations, no cryptic carvings. Had it been a hallucination born of exhaustion and fear? But as I rose, something crunched beneath my boot. Looking down, ice traced its way through my veins. There, nestled amongst the leaf litter, lay a small, dark wooden token. Etched onto its surface was one of the very sigils from the trees. It was real, all of it. With trembling fingers, I retrieved the token, thrusting it deep into my pocket. Proof, tangible evidence against the encroaching suspicion of madness. The eastern sky paled. Dawn's first fragile light filtered through the canopy. I had run through the entire night. In the growing illumination, a blaze mark on a tree trunk snagged my eye. A trail marker. Impossibly, I had stumbled back onto the mapped route. Ignoring the symphony of aches protesting throughout my body, I began descending, forcing a relentless pace. Civilization beckoned, a world governed by known laws, by sanity. It consumed the better part of the day, but finally the trailhead emerged. My vehicle a reassuringly mundane sight. Driving away, hands unsteady on the wheel, the sensation lingered. I had brushed against something ancient, potent, and inimical to human understanding. A week has passed since my return. The symbols remain stubbornly enigmatic despite inquiries to linguists, to historians. The wooden token rests upon my desk, a stark rebuttal to any lingering self-doubt. Yet, sometimes in the deepest hours of the night, the whisper returns, tracing the syllables of my name. And sleep offers no refuge, only recurring visions of that door, standing ajar in the forest's heartwood, patiently waiting. Logic dictates I forget, file it under inexplicable phenomena, and move forward. But I cannot. The enigma of what lies beyond that threshold consumes my waking thoughts. And in a recess of my soul, I scarcely dare acknowledge. I know the return is inevitable. The forest calls, its summons undeniable. For I sense with chilling certainty that I left something vital behind in those woods. Something more intrinsic than gear or sustenance. I left a fragment of myself. And the forest, I suspect, will not be quiescent until I come back to reclaim it. Rain sluiced down as Elias reached the manor, a deluge from a leaden canopy that mirrored the gloom settling in his own chest. The wind, a biting gust across the sodden fields, carried the scent of wet earth and decay. Strapped to his back, a modest pack held the tools of his peculiar trade. A notebook, a beam thrower, provisions enough for a brief siege against hunger, though the bulk of his belongings remained sequestered in the car. Perched at the terminus of a serpentine drive, swallowed on flank by skeletal trees, the house itself seemed to exhale neglect. Its walls wept patches of paint like leprous skin, and the windows, dark voids, offered no reflection, only stared with vacant indifference. Elias had come seeking grist for his next novel, lured by local whispers that painted this place not merely derelict, but haunted, a claim he felt compelled to dissect. He mounted the porch steps, each plank emitting a low groan under his weight, a mournful protest against intrusion. A frantic drummer took up residence behind his ribs, a peculiar tingling anticipation mixed with dread stirred in his gut. The massive front door, unlatched, hung slightly open, an invitation or a warning. Pushing it inward, it shrieked across the floorboards, releasing the breath of entombed decades, a musty fusion of damp rot and spectral dust. Elias stood within the cavernous maw of the foyer, letting his vision adjust to the Stygian dimness. High above, the ceiling soared into shadow, while to his left, a grand staircase ascended, its balustrade a shattered spine. Motes of dust danced in the thin shafts of bruised light, piercing the gloom. From deeper within the structure, the rhythmic drip of water echoed, a lonely metronome counting away the silence. Igniting his beam thrower, he slashed the darkness. The light revealed wallpaper peeling away in ragged strips, and on the walls, several ancestral portraits. Their subjects gazed out with austere judgment, though time had blurred their features into dissolving phantoms. Tentatively he advanced, the floorboards beneath him sighing under his boots. His pulse quickened its frantic rhythm. He fought to regulate his breathing, acutely aware that the profound silence amplified every minute sound into a startling event. Determined to proceed with a semblance of order, Elias began his survey in the foyer. He scanned the walls, probed a small, recessed cabinet, discovering only a lone, dust-filmed bottle. He tossed it aside. Its clink against the stone floor seemed unnaturally loud. His nerves felt frayed thin, his peripheral vision anticipating spectral intrusions at any moment. Nonetheless, he pressed onward, turning into what appeared to be a drawing room on the right. The air here hung thick with a stale miasma, redolent of decaying paper and wood returning to earth. Heavy draperies, thick with grime, masked two large windows, transforming daylight into mere suggestion. His light swept over a gutted couch, spilling its innards, a small table shrouded in dust, and bookshelves laden with leaning volumes. The beam flickered across titles, forgotten novels jostling with journals, bound in worn leather. He lifted one such journal, its pages brittle. Flipping through, he found scrawled chronicles of a life long past. Notes on domestic routines, mentions of callers, rudimentary sketches of the grounds. Nothing leapt out, no key to the manor's reputed spectral tenants. Then, abruptly, a soft concussion from above. Elias became stone. His beam thrower's light shot upwards, illuminating nothing but cracked plaster. Silence descended once more, thick and absolute. His heart hammered against his ribs. He waited, listening intently, but the sound did not repeat. An animal, he reasoned, a settling of the old structure. yet a cold serpent of unease coiled within him. He had to investigate. Leaving the drawing room's stagnant air, he stepped back into the foyer's embrace and confronted the staircase. The ascent felt precarious, each tread releasing a low moan of protest. The second-floor hallway pressed thick with darkness, relieved only by the faintest diffusion of gray light from a shattered window pane at its far extremity. An acrid tang, perhaps decaying varnish or something less definable, stung his nostrils. Before him stretched a narrow throat of a corridor, flanked by several closed doors. His footsteps resonated with hollow echoes on the bare wood. He swept his light left, then right, scrutinizing each portal. The frantic rhythm of his pulse persisted. His mouth felt parched. Reaching the first door on the right, he paused, straining to hear any sound from within. Nothing. He grasped the handle. It resisted, then yielded with a protracted groan. Inside lay a small bedchamber. Fractured walls webbed the plaster, and the bed frame stood broken, skeletal. A solitary chair, draped in dust like a funeral shroud, listed against one wall. He inhaled. The air held the ghost of old linens and time itself. A faintest susurrus like shifting silk brushed the silence. He held his breath, beams stabbing the corner shadows. Empty, the sound ceased as quickly as it had begun. Elias retreated with deliberate quiet, pulling the door closed behind him. He continued down the corridor, a sheen of perspiration gathering on his brow. Despite the ambient chill, a slight tremor afflicted his hands. He forced a calming breath. He passed another closed door, then a third. The final door on the left stood partially open, revealing a sliver of deeper dark within. As he approached, a fleeting distortion flickered across that gap, like a shadow detaching itself. His heart lurched. He reached for the handle, his palms slick with apprehension, fumbling the grip momentarily. Steadier now, he pushed the door wide. It opened onto what seemed a study, a sanctum of neglect. A desk stood sentinel against the far wall, flanked by a bookshelf. A window remained obscured by heavy drapes. The stale air carried an undercurrent, the faint, ghostly aroma of bygone tobacco. The floor lay littered with scraps of paper like fallen leaves after a storm. Elias stepped inside, his light tracing a path across the desk. Scattered letters lay there, alongside a small lamp, its bulb shattered. He leaned closer, drawn to one particular missive. "I keep hearing someone downstairs," the spidery script read. "The doors open and close, but I find no one." That single sentence sent tendrils of ice crawling up his spine, resonating perfectly with the burgeoning dread that had shadowed him since crossing the threshold. Another sound, this time from the hallway behind him, a slow, dragging friction, as if something heavy were being pulled across the floorboards. His chest constricted. Lowering the letter, he pivoted toward the doorway, casting his light into the oppressive gloom of the corridor. It stretched empty before him, yet the palpable sense of presence remained, an unseen weight, the prickle of invisible scrutiny. He stood motionless, listening. Only the incessant drip from below and the mournful sigh of the wind outside answered. A strange current traced his skin, raising the fine hairs on his arms. He decided to break the silence, his voice emerging as a thin reed. "Hello? Is anyone here?" He waited. The silence held its ground. He backed out of the study, debating his next move. Another room, perhaps, or a retreat downstairs for air. Turning fully to face the hallway, Something moved near the head of the stairs. A fleeting silhouette, a smudge against the gloom. He blinked, jerking the beam thrower upwards, but the shape dissolved. His stomach churned as a jolt of ice and fire. Pure adrenaline surged through him. He forced himself forward, the floor groaning beneath his boots, each step feeling leaden. Reaching the staircase, he peered down into the murky depths of the foyer. It seemed altered in the dim light. He fancied he heard whispering now, a sibilant chorus of indecipherable murmurs rising from below. His pulse became a deafening drum in his ears. His breathing grew shallow and rapid. He swept the light around frantically, half expecting to illuminate an intruder. He saw only the dust-furred floor, the weeping walls, the battered shield of the front door. He resolved to press on. The manor exerted a strange pull, a dark gravity compelling him to unravel its secrets. He descended the stairs, each step groaning its lament, echoing in the vast space. A moment of vertigo assailed him. He gripped the splintered banister for support. Reaching the ground floor, he directed his light toward a hallway branching off towards the rear of the house. The kitchen, he surmised, or perhaps pantries and service areas. Local lore mentioned a sprawling kitchen, a cellar beneath. He navigated the passage, flanked by more peeling wallpaper. The smell shifted here, acquiring mold's sour breath, mingled with something else, vaguely metallic. His heart thumped a heavy cadence against his ribs. His shoulders remained hunched against the unseen. At the hallway's end, a door yielded to reveal a large kitchen, a landscape of dereliction. Counters lay buried under dust and fallen plaster. Near a grimy window, a sink displayed blooms of rust like angry sores. Old pots and pans lay scattered across a sturdy wooden table, silent testament to forgotten meals. The furtive skitter of unseen life echoed from the walls. Rats, most likely. Swallowing hard, Elias moved deeper into the room. Chairs stood askew around the table, one overturned in a final convulsive gesture. Beside a pantry, he spotted a narrower door. The cellar, undoubtedly. His beam confirmed a short flight of steps, plunging into absolute black. A current of air flowed upwards, damp and cold, smelling of raw earth and advanced rot. He hesitated, a primal reluctance warring with morbid curiosity. He placed a foot on the first step. The stone felt cold and uneven beneath his sole. His breathing hitched as he descended, each step seeming to sink slightly, threatening to crumble. He continued his downward journey, light slicing the void, revealing rough-hewn stone walls, weeping moisture. Finally, he stood within the cellar proper. The ceiling hung low, forcing him into a slight stoop. Packed earth, strewn with loose stones, formed the floor. Around him stood the skeletal remains of crates and barrels, alongside old shelves bearing glass jars. Most were empty. A few held cryptic, dark lumps, viscous shadows preserved for decades. The nauseating miasma intensified, catching in his throat. He recoiled slightly. Methodically, he began scanning the walls, searching for hidden alcoves, secret passages. He found only intricate draperies of cobwebs and layers of settled dust. Then behind him, a dry rasp, like a foot dragging across the dirt floor. He whirled, light stabbing the darkness. Nothing. His pulse surged, a frantic drumbeat. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down his temple. He swallowed, fighting for composure, his thoughts scattering like startled birds. Was his mind conjuring phantoms from the oppressive atmosphere? He tried to anchor himself to fact. A sound heard, nothing seen. The cellar, though cluttered, was small. Hiding places were few. Yet the feeling of being watched intensified, a physical pressure. His hands trembled, causing the beam to waver. He began backing towards the stairs, his heart pounding with painful force. Then, from the periphery of his vision, a shape drifted across the far end of the vault. Pallid, indistinct, barely more than an ephemeral stain against the darkness. He jerked the light in its direction. Gone. His chest tightened, raw fear surged through him. He scrambled upwards, taking the stairs 2 at a time, heedless of the clatter, escaping the abyss. Back in the relative sanctuary of the kitchen, he slammed the cellar door shut, the sound echoing unnaturally. His breathing came in ragged gasps. His legs felt like water. He leaned heavily against the wall, pressing his forehead to the diseased skin of the peeling wallpaper, closing his eyes for a moment. The house felt alive now, thrumming with secrets, filled with movements and sounds that defied rational explanation. He attempted to gather the frayed edges of his composure, reminding himself of his purpose, material for a story. But he felt less like a researcher and more like prey caught in an unseen snare. He decided to return to the foyer to regroup and contemplate his next action. Leaving felt imperative, yet the thought of abandoning the Manor's enigma left him strangely dissatisfied. Slowly, he retraced his steps through the rear hallway, his light probing every shadow, his ears straining against the silence, catching every creak, every subtle shift of the ancient structure. Nearing the foyer, the whispering began again. Faint at first, then swelling, urgent, a tide of spectral gossip rising and falling, seemingly composed of multiple voices speaking at once. He swept the beam around the vast space, illuminating only dust motes dancing in the gloom and the ever-present shadows. He swallowed against a tightening throat. His scalp tingled, then a sudden pressure descended, the air growing dense, a palpable weight pressing in on him. Breathing became laborious, his temples throbbed. He thought he saw it again near the staircase, a figure gliding across the upper landing, a hunched silhouette. He snapped the light upwards, nothing but empty air and decaying grandeur. His heartbeat pounded a frantic tattoo in his ears. He felt starved for oxygen, as if the heavy air refused to enter his lungs. Every instinct screamed that he was profoundly unsafe. He pushed forward, stumbling towards the front door, his hand shaking as it reached for the knob. He turned it, poised for escape, but an irresistible compulsion made him glance back over his shoulder one last time. His beam thrower cut a swath across the foyer. There, nestled in the deep shadow at the base of the stairs, he saw it again. Distinctly this time, a hunched, distorted figure, present for a fraction of a second before vanishing utterly. His breath caught. A suffocating wave of dread washed over him. He wrenched the door open and burst onto the porch. The cool rain struck his face like a physical blow. He gasped, drinking in the clean, wet air. His heart still hammered violently. His clothes clung damply, soaked as much with sweat as with rain. Panting, he stood there, shining his light back through the open doorway into the house. The interior looked inert, quiescent, as if the phenomena he'd experienced had melted back into the fabric of the darkness. yet the tightness in his chest remained. The unnerving sensation of being watched, clinging like grave dust. Escape beckoned, but curiosity, that persistent devil, gnawed at him. He had merely skimmed the surface of this decaying behemoth. Undiscovered rooms, forgotten documents, the true heart of the haunting. It might all still lie within. His mind reeled, replaying the shadows, the whispers. The scholar wrestled the survivor. Finally, he opted for a tactical retreat, a pause to reclaim his breath and sanity. He walked off the porch, slogging through the clinging mire towards the car parked at the driveway's far end. The rain had turned the earth treacherous underfoot. His light caught the slick sheen of wet leaves, the wind sighing through the high branches like another form of whispering. His body remained taut, his pulse a rapid flutter against his skin. Reaching the car, he realized he was soaked through, a sodden effigy of his former self. Hair plastered to his forehead, jacket heavy with rainwater. He slid behind the wheel, but didn't immediately engage the engine. He drew several deep, ragged breaths, watching the tremors in his hands subside. His mind churned, grappling with the reality of his experience. Had he imagined the fleeting forms, conjured sounds from fear and suggestion? Yet the footsteps, the whispers, the undeniable presence, those felt chillingly real. After several minutes, his heartbeat slowed to a less frantic pace. He retrieved his notebook, forcing himself to chronicle his observations. The sequence of sounds, the visual anomalies, the unsettling fragment of the letter. The cellar's noxious miasma, the oppressive weight in the air. As he wrote, a bone-deep cold spread through him. He realized he was shivering violently. He briefly ran the engine, letting the heater blast warm air before cutting it again, wary of draining the battery in this desolate place. He stared at the dark bulk of the manor. Its windows remained empty sockets, staring into the rain-lashed twilight, yet he kept expecting a face to bloom in one of them. No movement disturbed the exterior. The house stood silent, imposing, wrapped in the embrace of the swaying skeletal trees. The lure of the abyss tugged at him, the urge to plunge back inside, to confront the source of the voices, to unearth the manor's buried narrative. But a deeper, more primal fear resonated in his gut, counseling retreat, while his sanity remained relatively intact. He remained in the car for a long while, suspended between morbid fascination and self-preservation, his head aching, the memory of those whispers still buzzing faintly in his ears. Eventually, the decision crystallized. He had gathered enough shadows for one day. He started the engine, its growl swallowed by the rain, the headlights cutting twin beams through the downpour, illuminating the sodden driveway. His hands felt steady enough now, but a knot of unease remained tightly cinched in his stomach. He cast one final look at the manor, a brooding silhouette against the bruised sky. Rain fell relentlessly, turning the drive into a shallow, glistening stream. He pulled away, a strange amalgam of profound relief and gnawing incompletion settling over him. As he navigated the winding track back toward the main road, his thoughts remained ensnared by the house, echoing with whispers, replaying the dance of fleeting shapes at the edge of sight. His mind raced, constructing theories, questioning his senses. He knew he would return, perhaps better equipped, perhaps not alone, compelled to capture tangible proof of whatever roamed those decaying halls. But for tonight, escape was paramount. Escape and the desperate need to clear his head of the manor's clinging darkness. Whether he had encountered genuine specters or merely the elaborate phantoms conjured by isolation and a decaying environment, Elias couldn't definitively say. All he possessed was the chilling certainty that the house felt sentient, alive with sounds and movements beyond easy explanation. His skin still prickled at the memory of the pallid shape in the cellar, the insistent whispering that seemed to follow him like his own shadow. Even now, miles away, his chest tightened when he recalled the suffocating pressure of the air within those walls. Proof eluded him. He had only his frantic notes and the vivid residue of fear, but the questions remained, a hunger for answers. He would go back. He had to, even terrified of the truths he might ultimately unearth. Terror isn't a language I speak fluently, but a disquiet settled deep in my bones the very first night within these walls. Nearly a year I'd scrimped, hoarding pennies against the dream of escaping my shoebox studio. I craved expanse, a neighborhood that didn't exhale defeat, some tangible proof of forward motion. Securing the lease on this second-floor apartment felt like breaching a summit. It was a significant ascent from the cramped valley I'd left behind. The building itself was a relic of another era, possessing a certain faded grandeur. Hallways yawned wide, ceilings soared, and beneath my feet lay the undeniable grain of authentic hardwood. During the initial walkthrough, this vintage aura charmed me, though a subtle undercurrent tugged at my senses. A faint, almost chemical tang of aged paint, layered over something deeper, dustier, the scent of time itself trapped in the plaster. Normal for such architecture, I reasoned. That first night, exhaustion claimed me swiftly. Moving detritus, boxes piled like forgotten monuments in every corner, had drained me utterly. My bed frame remained disassembled. A mattress thrown directly onto the floor, draped in blankets, became my immediate haven. Sleep found me easily, until around 3 in the morning. Darkness held sway, absolute silence reigned, and nothing initially seemed amiss. I rolled, seeking the drift back into oblivion, but then I discerned it. A sound from the corridor just beyond my door. A ponderous tread, heavy, like someone shod in thick-soled boots. It possessed a stark, unwavering rhythm, less a walk than a patrol, a measured cadence. Thump, 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 thump. Bolt upright, I strained to listen. The steps were unhurried, yet possessed a deliberate weight utterly unlike the usual apartment acoustics. The hurried scuffle, the apologetic shuffle. These impacts were forceful, distinct. One foot striking the floorboards, then the other with resolute finality. A neighbor, perhaps. Someone keeping nocturnal hours. A security patrol. But I'd seen no guard, only encountered the off-site proprietor who managed the building from across town. And the duration, it stretched unnaturally. The sound didn't recede, didn't suggest passage from one end of the hall to the other. It implied a relentless pacing back and forth, just outside my threshold. Slipping from the mattress, I crept to the door, pressed my eye to the peephole's distorting lens. Amber light from the cheap, perpetually burning overhead fixture illuminated the passage. Empty, utterly vacant. I waited, A frantic drummer taken residence behind my ribs. Still nothing. Yet the footfalls persisted, phantom impacts vibrating through the silence, pressing my ear flat against the cool wood. The sound was immediate, visceral, impossibly close, but the fisheye view remained stubbornly void. Dismiss it, I told myself. Grogginess, the building's ancient pipes settling, some auditory illusion born of fatigue. I slid the deadbolt home, twisted the knob lock until it clicked, a small metallic prayer. Retreating to my makeshift bed, I lay rigid. After an eternity, the pacing ceased. An hour ticked by, each second amplified by my heightened senses, before exhaustion finally dragged me under once more. Morning brought a flicker of self-deprecating humor, tiredness, and overactive imagination, plausible culprits. The day was consumed by the ritual of unpacking. The sofa found its place, the television blinked to life, dishes clattered into cupboards. I actively pushed the memory of the nocturnal rhythm away. The second night, I lingered late in the living room's nascent comfort, television casting flickering blue light across half-unpacked boxes. Midnight approached. A quick shower before bed seemed sensible. The bathroom branches off the bedroom via a short inner hall. As I reached for my bedroom door, I noticed it. The light from the main corridor, slicing thinly beneath my apartment entrance, was strobing, pulsing irregularly, as if someone stood directly outside, intermittently eclipsing the bulb. A neighbor passing, unlikely. The shadow lingered, paused directly before my door, the flickering too slow, too intentional. Unease coiled in my gut. My hand froze on the bedroom doorknob. I waited, breath held, for the shadow to glide away. It remained fixed. Drawn by a morbid curiosity, I moved stealthily towards the front door. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat bloomed on my palms. I am a grown man, yet that static silhouette radiated a primal wrongness. My fingers reached instinctively for the chain lock, verifying its security. Suddenly, violently, the doorknob on my side jiggled. A frantic, forceful rattle, as if an unseen hand grappled for entry. I snatched my hand back, a jolt of pure adrenaline coursing through me. Frozen for a heartbeat. Then, gripping the knob myself, I held it fast against the insistent twisting pressure from the other side. No sound accompanied the assault. No breath, no voice. Only raw, silent force warring against my grip. After several tense seconds, the pressure vanished. Silence rushed back in. I stood trembling, uncertain. Through the peephole, again, emptiness. The corridor stretched vacant, the overhead light burning steady and impassive. A tightness constricted my chest, but I forced logic upon myself. A prank, perhaps? Some bizarre neighborly initiation. I retreated, reminding myself of locks and solid wood, of the sanctuary within. Sleep that night was a shallow, troubled thing, punctuated by phantom creaks and imagined whispers from the living room. Every settling groan of the old building became a potential intrusion. Consciousness finally surrendered near 3 or 4 frayed edges giving way. Waking the following day, I discovered a bruise blooming on my left forearm. Dark purple against pale skin, vaguely circular, with faint finger-like impressions radiating outwards, almost a handprint, though indistinct. Prodding it elicited a sharp ache. It made no sense. No memory of impact, no recollection of colliding with furniture during the unpacking chaos. Though the apartment remained cluttered, no specific corner or edge sprang to mind as the culprit. A random injury, I concluded, dismissing the unsettling symmetry of the mark. That night, the strangeness deepened. Curled in bed, phone screen casting a pale glow, I scrolled idly. The apartment's internal hallway light was off, but the external corridor's amber luminescence still crept beneath the front door. Around 1 a.m., they returned. The footsteps, that same deliberate heavy-booted cadence. I sat bolt upright, phone clutched like a talisman, my gaze fixed on the bedroom door, anticipating the violating rattle of the knob. Heart rate spiking, mouth instantly dry, I waited. This time, the tread approached my door, continued past, seemed to reach the corridor's end, then turned, retracing its path. Each passage sent prickles across my skin, a hot, tense awareness. I held my breath as it drew level with my room. A primal urge screamed to fling open the door, to confront the source, but sheer terror paralyzed me. What void, what presence might wait on the other side? After perhaps 10 minutes of this measured back-and-forth haunting, a single thump resonated against my door. Not a violent kick, but a firm, solid impact, like a deliberate knock or something heavy striking the wood once. Slowly, silently, I slid from the bed, padded barefoot to the door, applied my eye to the peephole. Nothing. The hallway stretched, sterile and empty. No person, no shape, no shadow lingered. I touched the door's surface, cool wood, yet did I imagine a faint residual vibration, the ghost of the impact. It sounds ludicrous, I know, but it felt as if the door still hummed with a subtle tremor. For a long while I remained there, sentinel at the spyglass. Finally, a whispered reassurance to myself, there's no one there. I returned to bed, but sleep remained elusive. Wrapped tightly in blankets, I listened. Eventually, the footsteps faded into the building's latent hum. Dawn was breaking before exhaustion claimed me. Morning inspection of the hallway yielded nothing. The light fixture glowed steadily. The floorboards showed no scuffs from heavy boots. A pervasive unease shadowed my day. My appetite vanished. The bruise on my forearm deepened in color, a constant nagging reminder. I resolved to speak with a neighbor, but the adjacent doors on my floor remained stubbornly silent, seemingly unoccupied. A midday knock on the nearest door went unanswered. Repeated knocks, patient waiting. Nothing stirred within. The prospect of canvassing the entire building felt intrusive, desperate. I let it drop. The ensuing nights fell into a grim pattern. Around midnight, sometimes later, the steady, boot-like stomp would commence its patrol in the corridor. Sometimes a single pass, other times a prolonged vigil outside my door. I developed a ritual. Extinguish every light, sit cloaked in darkness, and simply listen. My mind became a taut wire, hyper-alert. The footsteps would begin, my breath would quicken, and I'd fight the childish impulse to cower in a closet. Instead, I remained seated, wide-eyed, phone clutched, emergency number hovering beneath my thumb, should the unseen escalate. But the peephole always revealed emptiness. Occasionally, a shadow would dance beneath the door. Sometimes the knob would give its disturbing jiggle. The feeling of presence was undeniable, yet visual confirmation remained eternally absent. One night, desperate for proof, I changed tactics. All lights extinguished, I positioned myself in the living room. Phone camera aimed steadfastly at the front door, recording. I sat on a chair, leaning forward into the gloom, waiting. The footsteps began around 1:30 a.m., slow, rhythmic, inescapable. My pulse thundered in my ears. I watched the bottom edge of the door, a sliver of dim corridor light, then a faint distortion, a shape obscuring the light, the silhouette of presence. The doorknob rattled, a brief, frantic spasm. I zoomed the camera, but the low light yielded only grainy ambiguity, a dark smear against the faint glow. Then the shape moved on, the courage to wrench open the door to confront whatever lurked failed me utterly. Weeks bled into one another, each night dreaded more than the last. I experimented with earlier bedtimes, hoping unconsciousness might offer immunity, futile. I'd invariably wake near the same hour, that familiar knot of anxiety tightening in my chest. Some nights brought only the pacing, others featured the soft knock, the brief testing turn of the knob. New bruises appeared, one on my thigh, another near my shoulder blade, always in locations inexplicable by everyday bumps, always roundish, tender, suggestive of a grasp. The chilling thought arose. Was something happening while I slept? Something erased from my waking memory? I lodged a complaint with the building proprietor. He listened with a carefully neutral expression, then informed me no other tenants had reported disturbances. His gaze held a hint of pitying concern, the look one gives the overly stressed or imaginative. He performed a cursory inspection one afternoon, tested the locks, checked the doorframe, shrugged. Everything appeared normal, he declared. I knew then he considered me unreliable, perhaps unraveling. My recordings offered no vindication. Faint footsteps, yes, but overlaid on silent, empty visuals. Moving felt like defeat, a surrender not only of savings but of principle. I'd fought for this space. Stubbornness anchored me. I wouldn't be driven out by what? Shadows and sounds? So I stayed, adapted, fortified my door with additional hardware, a heavy-duty chain, a sliding bolt installed with my own trembling hands. Earplugs became allies, as did headphones piping white noise into my skull. These dulled the auditory torment but failed to prevent the bruises. I still woke periodically, marked by soreness I couldn't account for. Last night pushed me closer to the edge. To bed around midnight, locks triple-checked. Sometime in the deepest hours, I surfaced. Not gradually, but jolted awake by a profound sense of dread that preceded conscious thought. Opening my eyes, I found myself lying on my side, facing the bedroom door. It stood ajar, wide open, despite my absolute certainty of having closed it, and framed in the doorway, a shape, not solid, not defined, but a density in the air darker than the ambient gloom spilling from the living room beyond. I froze, breath caught, heart battering my ribs like a trapped bird. My limbs felt leaden, unresponsive. I managed to blink, a desperate, involuntary spasm, and in that instant the shape seemed to recoil, melting back around the corner, vanishing into the short hallway. Adrenaline surged, breaking the paralysis. I scrambled from the bed, lunged for the light switches, bedroom first, then the living room, flooding the apartment with harsh illumination. Empty, silence. The front door remained secure, deadbolt thrown, chain firmly in its track. I stood there shaking, arms rigid at my sides, the echo of the shape searing my retinas. Which brings me to now. Seated in the overlit living room, nerves frayed to the breaking point, my body aches with accumulated fatigue, the bruise on my forearm a persistent throb, still fading. Compulsively, I check the peephole. The corridor remains quiet. For now. What is the next step? Part of me screams to pack, flee, absorb the financial blow, find anywhere else. Another smaller part clings to rationality. Am I sleepwalking? Is some vindictive neighbor orchestrating this elaborate torment? Yet the bruises, the undeniable consistency of that marching tread, these resist easy dismissal. For now, I wait, hoping to endure another night without waking to find locked doors inexplicably open, without hearing those methodical bootfalls approaching my bedroom. I am profoundly tired, yet the thought of lying down, of closing my eyes, feels impossible. Any moment now, I expect it. The thumping, the slow, deliberate rhythm resuming its patrol in the hallway. And a cold certainty settles within me. I don't know how much more of this my sanity can withstand. The campus cafe locks its doors with unwavering punctuality at 9:45 p.m., a mere 15 minutes before Dr. Eris Thorne concludes his intricate lecture on the labyrinth of cognitive psychology. Through the expansive library windows, Alara could perceive the ghostly ballet of baristas swabbing down gleaming steel counters. Another night, then, to navigate the path home bereft of her customary caffeine armor. The allure of evening courses lay in their hushed intimacy, the blessed ease of finding parking, the counterweight. Everything else, particularly now in the waning days of autumn, when dusk descended like a velvet shroud by 6, smothering the city in premature night. The passage from the university's embrace to her apartment wasn't epic. 20 minutes adhering to the main thoroughfares, a brisk 15 slicing through the sleeping residential veins. Tonight, however, an unusual hesitation anchored her at the building's heavy glass doors. Perhaps it was the peculiar stillness clinging to the air, or the way the sodium lamps cast a watery, inadequate glow upon the pavement. Her classmates dissipated swiftly, most swallowed by the concrete maw of the parking garage, while Alara adjusted the weight of her backpack, a familiar prelude to the solitary trek. 10 minutes unspooled without incident, tracing the well-worn groove of her routine 3 nights a week, past the stoic chemistry building, skirting the shadowed student center, slipping through the wrought iron campus gates. The darkened windows of the closed cafe threw back a fleeting reflection of her singular form. She was poised to turn onto Ash Lane, her usual artery home, when movement snagged the corner of her vision. 2 men pacing the opposite sidewalk, perhaps 30 feet behind. Something in their languid gait arrested her. Too slow for the hour, too deliberate. Alara pressed onward, yet her steps unconsciously quickened. The sharp echo of their footfalls seemed to latch onto hers, their rhythm accelerating in tandem. A frantic bird beat against her ribs as the realization dawned. They were crossing the street, angling directly into her path. "Don't panic," she commanded herself. "You're being paranoid. They probably live around here." But a swift, furtive glance over her shoulder vaporized that flimsy reassurance. They were closer now, propelled by an unmistakable intent. One was tall and gaunt, the other shorter, built with a dense solidity. Both were cloaked in dark attire, their faces obscured within the deep wells of hooded sweatshirts. Fumbling for her phone, she pressed it to her ear, feigning a call. "Hey," she managed, her voice a surprisingly stable facade over a racing pulse. "Yeah, I'm almost there. 5 minutes, tops. You're still outside waiting, right?" The silence on the other end was absolute. They didn't decelerate. If anything, their pace intensified. Her mind scrambled through possibilities. Ash Lane offered the swiftest route, but it was poorly lit, flanked by student rentals that stood mostly dark and vacant during the mid-semester lull. The main road would add 10 minutes, a significant delay, but a car swept past, its headlights momentarily carving the men's features from the gloom. Their focus was utterly fixed on her, no conversation passing between them, no casual glances betraying the awareness of ordinary pedestrians. Just watching, following, shrinking the distance with every synchronized step. The decision fractured the night air in an instant. Instead of the familiar turn onto Ash Lane, she forged straight ahead, toward the brighter confluence of streets beckoning from the intersection. Behind her, a low, frustrated curse cut the silence. The pretense was shed. Their footsteps hammered against the pavement, escalating to a near run. Her fingers, slick with sudden sweat, navigated her phone's mapping application, desperately seeking an alternate current. And then it surfaced. Mrs. Petrova's voice from weeks ago, describing the intricate network of service alleys snaking behind the old neighborhood houses, pathways she traversed daily with her yapping terriers. She spotted the first alley mouth just ahead, a narrow fissure between a shuttered bookstore and the now silent cafe. Both structures casting long shadows, but their security lamps bathing the passage in a cold, stark light. Without hesitation, Elara plunged into it, her walk breaking into a controlled, ground-eating jog. The alley exhaled into a small, unexpected courtyard, then immediately splintered, offering 3 diverging paths. She chose the right fork, then another sharp right, followed by a left. Behind her, the distinct slap of pursuing feet reverberated off the close brick walls, but the sound was different now, uncertain, confused. They hadn't anticipated this detour into the neighborhood's hidden capillaries. Ahead, a familiar sight bloomed in the dimness. Mrs. Petrova's garden wall, famously draped in tenacious climbing roses. Another left turn here, then a straight shot toward the relative sanctuary of Elm Boulevard. Elara's lungs seared with the effort, but a fierce tide of adrenaline propelled her onward. The footsteps dogging her path grew fainter, more disconnected, swallowed by the twisting geometry of the alleys. A motion sensor floodlight mounted on a nearby garage flared abruptly, blinding her with its sudden harsh glare. As her vision swam back into focus, she saw it. The alley's exit onto Elm Boulevard, less than 50 feet away. Beyond lay the reassuring choreography of passing cars, the murmur of other people, the comforting pulse of the main street. She burst from the alley's confines onto the broad sidewalk, nearly colliding with a group of students heading toward the beckoning lights of the late-night diner. Hands reached out, steadying her, their faces etched with concern. "Are you okay?" one asked. When Alara choked out that she was being followed, they immediately formed a protective constellation around her, guiding her toward the diner's warmth while another student placed a call to campus security. Inside the brightly lit diner, enveloped by the rich aroma of coffee and the reassuring hum of late-night chatter, the tremor finally subsided in Alara's hands. Campus security officers materialized quickly, their calm professionalism a solid anchor in the receding tide of fear. They recorded her statement, then escorted her the final blocks to her apartment. A search of the alleys yielded nothing, but they assured her patrols in the area would be increased. The following day, Alara channeled the lingering fear into meticulous preparation. She charted every possible route between the university and her apartment, annotating maps with notations for well-lit streets, areas with high foot traffic, and the locations of security cameras. Most importantly, she mapped the labyrinthine alley network, documenting each entrance and exit with photographs. Knowledge became her newfound armor. Mrs. Petrova, hearing of the incident, convened a neighborhood meeting. In a surge of communal action, residents installed additional motion sensor lights throughout the alleyways. A phone tree was established for students navigating the late walk home. Several neighbors designated their porches as safe havens, marked by small, unassuming green lights signifying help available here. Her classmates rallied too. Walking groups coalesced organically, schedules were coordinated, and location-sharing apps became standard practice. Dr. Thorne subtly adjusted his routine, concluding his seminar 5 minutes early, allowing students to depart together while the campus cafe still offered its light and life. The incident catalyzed institutional changes as well. The university extended the campus shuttle service hours and added new stops that reached deeper into the residential neighborhoods. Emergency call boxes sprouted along popular pedestrian routes, and a dedicated safety escort program was launched for students attending night classes. Yet, the most significant transformation unfolded within Alara herself. She continued her evening studies, still walked the same streets, but she moved through them differently now, acutely aware, thoroughly prepared, fortified by the intimate knowledge of her escape routes. A personal alarm clipped discreetly to her bag, and she enrolled in self-defense classes offered at the student center. Fear hadn't been exorcised, but it had been transmuted. It no longer paralyzed, it informed. Last week, when a new student in her psychology seminar expressed apprehension about walking home alone after dark, Alara didn't share her story of terror. Instead, she unfolded her meticulously annotated map. She introduced the newcomer to the walking group and explained Mrs. Petrova's network of green porch lights. She spoke of the alleys, reframing them not as places of inherent menace, but as potential conduits to safety, pathways to be navigated with awareness and strategy. Because that was the profound truth unearthed that night. Safety wasn't merely about the avoidance of danger. It was about intimately knowing your environment, trusting the quiet hum of intuition, and actively weaving the threads of community connection. Sometimes the moments that tighten their icy grip are the very catalysts that forge the strongest bonds, transforming shadowed alleyways into passages of light and turning strangers into unforeseen guardians. Lodged between neuronal pathways and behavioral conditioning, precisely where page 143 kissed 144 in my psychology text, lay the first missive. Monday's lecture droned on, Professor Armand dissecting cognitive traps, but my focus snagged on the jagged piece of yellow legal paper. Unfamiliar script declared, "Your smile is a sunrise in my ordinary day." A strange warmth, archaic almost, bloomed and faded. Around the tiered lecture hall, faces were wrapped or glazed, oblivious. I slipped the paper into the canvas depths of my bag, a fleeting curiosity extinguished. Until Wednesday, my jacket, draped over a cafeteria chair back, yielded the second note, tucked deep within a pocket I hadn't used. Azure becomes you, a color you should embrace more often. A violation, cold and sharp, traced my spine. Someone's fingers had trespassed on my belongings, unseen. Today I wore forest green. The blue they admired belonged to yesterday. The clatter and hum of the crowded lunchroom suddenly felt predatory, eyes pricking my skin from unseen vantages. Then he materialized, tall, impeccably dressed, projecting a confidence that didn't quite ignite the cool blue of his eyes. He slid into the chair opposite mine without invitation. "Silas," he announced, the name offered like a credential. "I've noticed you on campus. I suspect we share certain sensibilities." Politely, I gestured towards my open textbook, murmured about needing to study, but the hint glanced off his polished surface. He commenced a monologue, a curated tour of his interests, his triumphs, his meticulously charted future. As my hands began gathering books, stacking pens, his smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "We should have coffee," he stated, the inflection less suggestion than decree. "There's an excellent spot just off university grounds." Gently, firmly, I declined, inventing a boyfriend, a convenient shield. For a fleeting instant, his expression clouded, a storm gathering behind the facade before the smile was forcibly reconstructed. "Lying isn't necessary," he murmured, his voice dropping intimately. "I know you're unattached. I've been observant." He rose, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. "Consider the coffee. Persistence is one of my virtues." After that, the notes multiplied, metastasizing. They materialized in textbooks left unattended for moments, clung to my locker door at the gym, were discovered like unwelcome dew beneath the windshield wiper of my aging sedan. Each message burrowed deeper, revealing an unnerving, granular awareness of my rhythms, my habits, my solitary moments. I began weaving variations into my daily tapestry, new paths to lecture halls, obscure corners of the library, different shifts. Yet Silas invariably surfaced, a silent presence 2 tables over in the hushed library, a shadow trailing me towards the campus cafe, an unnerving fixture outside classroom doors. Always that smile, vacant as a stage set, always the low-voiced pressure for coffee. When I finally cornered him between classes, stating with unequivocal clarity that my answer was no, now and forever, his composure fractured, anger flared in his eyes. "You're merely testing me," he insisted, his voice gaining an edge that drew glances. "It's obvious we're suited. Why resist the inevitable?" Faces turned, curious or uncomfortable, but no one stepped closer. The intrusion escalated, breaching the boundary of my part-time sanctuary at the campus bookstore. He'd appear, purchasing a single pen, a pack of gum, leveraging the transaction to pass through my checkout lane, comments on my schedule, the specific shade of my sweater, snippets of overheard conversations with patrons, casual invasions delivered with that unwavering smile. Maya, my sharp-eyed co-worker, perceived my rigid posture, the forced neutrality of my responses. She began wordlessly swapping registers whenever Silas materialized, a small act of quiet alliance. "Report him," she urged later, wiping down the counter. "Campus security, this isn't normal." But I hesitated, tangled in self-doubt. He hadn't issued overt threats. Was this just profoundly awkward, unwanted courtship? The precipice arrived on a late Thursday study night. Exhaustion hummed beneath my skin as I walked towards my car. The asphalt expanse of the parking lot nearly deserted under the sodium lamps. And there he was, leaning against the driver's side door, another folded note visible in his hand. The air thickened. My keys felt slippery, alien in my trembling hand. Without a conscious decision, I pivoted, walking briskly, almost running, back towards the receding sanctuary of the library's lit entrance. The campus security officer who took my statement listened patiently, her gaze sharpening as I laid out the collection of yellow notes, a timeline of escalating intrusion. She saw it immediately. Not flirtation, but fixation. With quiet efficiency, she guided me through filing a formal report, meticulously documenting every encounter, every boundary ignored, every unsolicited appearance. Immediate protocols clicked into place. Security escorts materialized after my evening classes. The bookstore manager briefed, adjusted my hours, and authorized upgraded surveillance cameras. Professors readily agreed to seating changes, facilitating my efforts to become unpredictable. The ripple spread. The Women's Center hosted an urgent seminar on recognizing stalking behaviors, its necessity underscored by my experience. Other students, emboldened, stepped forward, sharing hushed stories of similar unsettling pursuits. A network knitted itself together, shared safety strategies, watchful eyes, mutual support. The university administration, prodded into action, undertook a comprehensive revision of harassment policies, sharpening definitions, clarifying procedures. Emergency call boxes, stark blue sentinels, sprouted across campus walkways. A safety app offering a direct line to security with a single tap was launched. Silas received an official documented warning, then inevitably a campus restraining order, when he violated its terms, leaving yet more notes, compulsive echoes of his obsession. The university's response intensified. Mandatory counseling sessions were scheduled, his class timetable forcibly altered to eliminate potential intersections with mine. The ordeal undeniably reshaped my passage through the world, but not towards the fear he likely intended. Instead of shrinking, my awareness sharpened. Preparedness became a reflex. I enrolled in self-defense, absorbing not just physical techniques, but the psychological architecture of boundary enforcement. Maya and I galvanized, launched a peer support group, a haven for students navigating the murky waters of unwanted attention. We shared knowledge, recognizing red flags, the critical importance of documentation, accessing campus resources. The group flourished, a testament to shared vulnerability transformed into collective strength. The campus newspaper, Catching the Current, ran an investigative series on personal safety and cultures of respect, amplifying student voices, including anonymized accounts like mine. These articles sparked dialogues that spilled out of classrooms, echoed through residence halls, fueled debates in student organizations, vital conversations about consent, about intervention, about the fundamental right to move through shared spaces without fear. Last week, a freshman visibly shaken by persistent, unwelcome advances from a classmate found her way to our group. She didn't find helplessness. She found a community equipped to guide her legally and safely. The notes Silas wrote, instruments of his intended control, now serve a different purpose. They are included in training materials for resident advisors, illustrating the insidious creep of escalating behavior. What was designed to isolate and intimidate has become an artifact of education, a tool for prevention, because the lesson learned, hard-won and resonant, was this: unwanted attention isn't a twisted form of flattery, it's a naked bid for power. Genuine connection requires no coercion, no relentless pursuit. It blossoms only in the soil of mutual respect, clearly articulated boundaries, and the inviolable freedom to say no. Now, crossing the quad, I see the tangible signs of change. The reassuring blue lights of the call boxes, posters promoting the safety app, the quiet hum of the support networks. One individual's campaign of fear has inadvertently catalyzed a community's commitment to safeguarding everyone's right to feel secure. The memory retains its chill. The first time the wrapping intruded, midnight had bled into the nascent hour of 1. I lay adrift in bed, consciousness fraying at the edges, attempting to anchor myself after a taxing workday. No unsettling thoughts occupied the landscape of my mind. I was simply present, adrift, my gaze lost in the familiar geography of the darkened ceiling. Then came the sound. 3 distinct, brittle taps against the glass. Not a rattling, not a scraping, but a deliberate, hollow percussion on my bedroom window pane. Instantly, I was bolt upright. My eyes shot towards the window, obscured by the heavy drapes. Silence reclaimed the room, thick and absolute. An errant branch? A nocturnal bird? Implausible. My apartment perched on the 3rd story, a sheer drop separating my window from the pavement below. Logic dictated impossibility, shrugging it off as phantom acoustics, some trick of the wind against the brickwork. I courted sleep once more. Yet the echo of those 3 taps resonated, a persistent mental reverberation, until exhaustion finally submerged me, carrying the assumption it was a singular anomaly. The following night, punctually, it returned. This time, anticipation coiled within me. I'd been sitting up, the glow of my phone illuminating a page, a vigil kept against the silence. As the clock hands converged near 1, the familiar cadence sounded. Tap, tap, tap against the glass. A freeze seized me, my chest tightening as if bound by wire. My pulse throbbed, a frantic drum against the artery in my neck. With painstaking slowness, careful to betray no movement, I drew back the curtain's edge. The vista offered only the somber architecture across the street, a scattering of muted lights in distant windows, and the vast, indifferent dark. The pane itself was immaculate. No skeletal branches clawed nearby. No pipes ran adjacent. A faint zephyr stirred the air, insufficient to cause such a sound. I strained my ears, listening for the flutter of wings or the rustle of displaced leaves, hearing only the profound hush peculiar to the deepest hours of the morning. After a minute suspended in observation, I let the curtain fall, retreating into the quietude of my room. Sleep was a reluctant visitor that night, arriving only after an hour of troubled stillness. Night the third. The ritual repeated. Same hour, same signature. 3 raps, light yet undeniably firm, directly on the window. My reaction was honed, immediate. The instant the sound registered, I sprang from bed, wrenching the curtain aside. Pressing my face close to the cool glass, I scanned the sheer drop below. Nothing stirred. My gaze swept left, then right, scrutinizing the frame itself. No fissures, no blemishes, nothing remotely capable of producing that percussive triplet. I stepped back, standing there in shorts and a t-shirt, my muscles taut, the fine hairs on my arms erect. A surge of resolve propelled me to action. I unlatched the window swiftly, thrusting it upwards, and leaned my head into the night air. The street below lay deserted. Parked vehicles gleamed dully under sparse streetlights. The sidewalk vacant. No creature, human or animal, was visible. Gazing upwards revealed only the higher, silent floors. After a moment absorbing the chill air, I retracted, securing the window. A clammy sweat bloomed beneath my arms. Despite the room's cool temperature, a peculiar weight settled in my stomach, a dense, indigestible knot. Sleep, when it came, was fragmented and shallow. Morning found me bleary-eyed and resolved. The persistent unease demanded investigation. Following a hasty breakfast, I descended to street level, circling the building's perimeter, seeking any plausible explanation for the nightly disturbance. My bedroom window faced the avenue directly. Nothing encroached upon its space. No gnarled tree limbs stretched towards that height. No errant cables swung nearby. It wasn't adjacent to any balcony, just an uninterrupted vertical plane of concrete and glass descending to the walkway. The building's facade was solid, no loose gutters or decorative elements apparent. Frustration mounting, I found precisely nothing. Returning indoors, irritation prickled beneath my skin. That evening, I maintained my vigil. As 1 o'clock approached, my phone, flashlight app engaged, rested in my hand. The knocks arrived, punctual as ever. I vaulted from bed, yanked back the curtain, and flooded the window with the artificial beam. Emptiness greeted me. Throwing the window open, I extended my arm, sweeping the light across the exterior darkness. Only the impassive structure opposite, its windows mostly dark or curtained, reflected the beam. Leaning out cautiously, I scanned upwards, then downwards, along the building's face. Still nothing. I remained there, arm aching, the cool night air raising gooseflesh, until the futility became undeniable. Pulling back inside, I sealed the window. My heart maintained its rapid cadence, a dull ache pulsing behind my eyes. Sleep offered little respite. The ensuing nights became a laboratory of failed experiments. One evening, I retired early, hoping unconsciousness might preempt the event. But it pierced my slumber near 1, insistent as always, 3 raps, precise and unwavering. I bolted awake, flicked on the overhead light, and glared at the window. Silence. My phone confirmed the time, 1:02 a.m., always within that narrow window. The next night, I left the curtains open, determined to witness the source. The taps sounded while my eyes were fixed directly on the pane. Yet I perceived no motion, no fleeting shadow, no anomalous reflection, only the dull, familiar percussion. My jaw clenched, my throat papery dry. Rising, I touched the glass. It was cold, smooth, utterly mundane. I inspected the locks, the frame's integrity, the narrow outer ledge. Everything appeared normal, secure. A creeping dread began to colonize the hours before bed. As midnight approached, a low hum of anxiety would start, a tensing anticipation of the inevitable sound. Music through headphones offered temporary distraction, but as the critical hour neared, I'd inevitably pause the track, slip off the headphones, and wait, suspended in the quiet. The knocks would arrive, launching me towards the window. Once, immediately following the sound, I called out, my voice a low, strained query. "Who's there?" Silence answered. Another night, I tried mirroring the sound, rapping 3 times with my own knuckles against the inner pane. Nothing. I listened intently for retreating footsteps or hushed voices on the street below, but only the distant sigh of occasional traffic broke the stillness. I sought out the building superintendent one afternoon. He stood in the lobby, arms folded, regarding me with benign skepticism. No other tenants had reported disturbances, he assured me. Perhaps it was the building settling, he suggested, or noises emanating from the heating system, the plumbing. But I knew the distinct character of the sound. It wasn't the groan of pipes or the creak of walls. It was unequivocally on the glass. I offered my thanks and retreated, the conversation yielding nothing. Speaking to neighbors felt like a further exercise in futility. We existed in polite anonymity, and I couldn't imagine their reaction. No one else seemed troubled by nocturnal mysteries. One night, I attempted to capture proof. Placing my phone on the bedside table, I initiated a record in minutes before the anticipated time. I lay rigid, staring towards the window, my breath shallow, my stomach a tight knot. The knocks came, right on schedule. Reviewing the recording later, I heard them. 3 faint, distinct taps embedded in the audio file. Tangible evidence, yet evidence of what? An inexplicable sound, nothing more. The following day, I subjected the window frame to microscopic scrutiny, examining every millimeter. No hairline cracks, no loose fittings. The screws were tight, the seals intact. Pressing firmly on the glass from inside produced no rattle. The frame itself felt immovable, solid. A few nights later, I changed tactics, stationing myself in the living room, which faced a different direction, leaving the bedroom door ajar. At precisely 1, the faint rapping reached me even there. I sprinted into the bedroom, desperate to catch a glimpse of whatever retreated. Flipping on the light, I rushed to the window. The night outside was placid, empty. The silence felt almost aggressive. I stood, breathing heavily, hands trembling slightly, wiping a sheen of sweat from my brow with my forearm. A pervasive fatigue began to settle over me. My sleep patterns were fractured. I experimented with staying out late, deliberately avoiding my apartment during the critical hour, returning in the desolate quiet of 2 or 3 in the morning. Upon re-entry, however, the bedroom always felt charged. I'd find myself compelled to check the window, tracing the cool surface of the glass with my fingertips. Faint, almost invisible marks near the edges seemed to appear, or perhaps they were figments of my strained perception, always there but newly noticed. Touching them revealed only smooth glass. I even meticulously cleaned the window pane, hoping to dislodge or detect anything clinging to the exterior. Silence was the only result. One evening, driven by desperation, I rigged a crude detector. Using tape and small strips of paper, I carefully affixed them to the outside edge of the window frame, leaning precariously out into the night air to do so. My heart hammered against my ribs, the vulnerability of hanging partially out of a third-floor window palpable as I fumbled with the tape. I'd scanned the street below beforehand, ensuring no observers. Task completed, I shut the window, drew the curtain, and waited. The knocks arrived, punctual and undeterred. The following morning, inspection revealed the paper strips undisturbed, the tape perfectly intact. No tears, no scuffs. My frustration deepened into a weary ache. I considered enlisting a friend, Elias, for a shared vigil, but our schedules stubbornly refused to align. He worked dawn shifts, unable to commit to the late hour. Another acquaintance, Chloe, advised me to simply ignore it, a feat that felt psychologically impossible. The sound wasn't random. Its metronomic regularity, always 3 knocks, always around 1, precluded dismissal. Weeks bled into a month, leaving me perpetually worn, dark circles blooming beneath my eyes, my nerves frayed. Lying in bed became an exercise in tension, neck stiff, fists unconsciously clenched. I tried wielding a high-powered flashlight again, aiming it the instant the first knock sounded, sweeping the beam downwards, sideways, upwards. I anticipated something. A large moth, a bat, debris caught on an unseen wire. The beam illuminated only empty air and the silent facade across the way. No balconies aligned with my window. No visible perch offered a vantage point. The windows opposite remained dark or curtained voids. Could the sound originate within the glass itself? Some bizarre internal stress? Unlikely. It possessed the distinct quality of impact, a knuckle, perhaps, or a small pebble. Not a mechanical tick, but a tap delivered with intent. One night I resorted to earplugs. The sound still penetrated, faint but undeniable, jolting me awake. I nearly ripped the plugs out in my haste to reach the window. The scene remained unchanged. I tried relocating entirely, sleeping on the living room sofa with the bedroom door firmly shut. Around 1, a muffled version seemed to filter through the wall. Stealing back into the bedroom, I stood in the darkness, listening intently until 2, but heard nothing further. Repeating the experiment the next night, I woke on the sofa shortly after 1, rushing into the bedroom with the distinct sensation of having just missed whatever had been there. The strain intensified. I approached the superintendent again, Mr. Henderson this time. He listened with an air of strained patience, suggesting I might be overly sensitive to normal building sounds. I played him the recording. Could be anything, he shrugged. Neighbor tapping their own window, sound travels weirdly. But the vibration, I insisted, I could feel it in the glass. It was localized, immediate. He offered vaguely to come up one night, an offer never fulfilled, lost to claimed busyness or forgetfulness. I abandoned that avenue. Leaving the lights blazing all night proved ineffective. Leaving the window slightly ajar yielded the most baffling result. At 1 a.m., 3 knocks sounded, seemingly on the glass pane itself, despite the opening. How? I leaped up, confirmed the gap. A few inches of open space. Was the frame being struck? Reaching out into the cool air, my fingers traced the smooth exterior frame. No loose components, nothing amiss. I shut the window, standing rigid, jaw locked. Time unspooled, and the knocking became a fixture, an inexplicable constant. My nights evolved into a relentless cycle of observation and failed countermeasures. I set up my phone on a makeshift tripod, recording video trained on the window, night vision enabled. The resulting footage captured the audio perfectly, 3 clear taps, but the visual remained static, just the window pane reflecting the dim interior of my room. No external movement, no flicker of light, only the abrupt sound emerging from silence. I scrutinized the video frame by frame, eyes straining, nothing. I tried resting my hand flat against the inner frame as the hour approached, waiting to sense the impact directly. When the knocks came, a faint but distinct tremor traveled through the wood into my fingertips. It was undeniably external. The conviction solidified, but the question remained, sharp and unanswered. What could possibly reach my window night after night at the same hour, leave no trace, and vanish instantaneously? The approach of 1 a.m. began to trigger a Pavlovian response. Tension tightening my shoulders, a film of sweat under my arms, my heart rate accelerating. Dinner sometimes felt difficult to swallow. The chronic stress of the unknown manifested as headaches, a restless energy that had me pacing the apartment, peering from other windows, checking the hallway, listening at my own front door. Everything always appeared normal, except for that single window at that single appointed hour. I never discovered the source. The rapping persisted, night after night, an unwavering rhythm of 3 taps on the glass. No culprit cited, no explanation unearthed. Mr. Henderson remained unhelpful, neighbors remained silent. Logic offered no foothold. Eventually, the frantic energy of investigation subsided, replaced by a strange, weary accommodation. I stopped trying to decipher it. I would wake near one, hear the familiar taps, cast a cursory glance towards the window, register the continued absence of anything visible, and then settle back into bed. Months later, the sound still provoked a flicker of unease, but the panic had ebbed. It became, bizarrely, part of the nocturnal landscape of my life. Even now, it happens. I've rearranged furniture, positioning the bed on the opposite wall. I've invested in heavier, light-blocking curtains. I've tried drowning it out with music. Nothing deters the knocks. They arrive. I've learned not to shout into the darkness, not to exhaust myself with fruitless inspections. I simply acknowledge the sound, accept my inability to control or comprehend it, and wait for the silence to return. The expectation of an answer has long since faded. The puzzle remains unsolved. Perhaps unsolvable. I just endure it. But the memory of those first weeks lingers. The raw fear born of the unknown, the clammy sweat on my neck, the gnawing exhaustion, the desperate scramble for reason. The knocks themselves never caused physical harm. They never breached the barrier of the glass. They simply occurred, a persistent, inexplicable reminder from the darkness outside that not everything yields to understanding. It remains a disturbance, yet one I now live alongside. That is the extent of it.